on the war. And all we have to show for it is this is the cumulative amount of arrests from 1970 till a couple years ago. Actually, it's about 2 million more than what I say here. But back then it was 39 million arrests for nonviolent drug offenses. Think of how many people's lives you're affecting here. And it's not just the person you're arresting, it's their entire family gets drugged down in this, sucked down in this whirlpool that's so hard to recover from. Today in my country, there's 97 million people who admit to having used an illegal drug. That's most of the adults in the country. And every one of them is a criminal, as far as we're concerned. And every one of them could go to jail. And thank goodness we haven't managed to do that. Because if we did that, we would only have two kinds of people in the United States. We'd have the people in prison, and we'd have the people guarding those people in prison. And I sure don't want to live like that. So this is not a war on drugs. This is a war on people. It's a war on our children, it's a war on our parents, and a war on ourselves. And the people in Lee believe we've got to stop this. And for those of you who weren't there yesterday, let me explain to you about Lee. Lee stands for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and it's an organization that I helped found with 4 other police officers 8 years ago when I retired, and I felt so bad about my role in implementing these terrible drug laws. And today we have over 30,000 members in 78 countries. And we're not just cops anymore, we're police, judges, prosecutors, prison wardens, DEA and FBI agents. And we're all calling for an end to this terrible war. We want to treat drug abuse as a health problem. And we have a tremendous credibility. Because we can say the same thing a college professor or a defense attorney says, and people just don't want to listen to them. So they say, oh, they just want to get high maybe, and they just shut their ears. They don't do that with us. You know, when I say I spent 26 years of my life in the New Jersey State Police fighting against drug abuse, 14 years undercover, people listen then from that point on to what I have to say. And I say the same thing that the good folks, college professors, the defense attorneys, the other people are saying. But because I'm listening, 80%, or because they're listening, 80% of my audience is convinced, no matter where I go, and not just me. We have 100 speakers. We've done 6,000 presentations in the last 6 years. No matter where we go, 80% of our audience is convinced, and we don't have usually public talks. We talk to civic and professional, religious and educational organizations, things like Rotaries, Kiwanis clubs, Lions clubs, Chambers of Commerce. These are very conservative people in political groups. And it's these people that I'm telling you, 80% of them agree with us. People are so fed up with this war on drugs. They want to see it end. So as I pointed out yesterday, it's a lot of lives to destroy, it's a lot of money to waste, but, and as far as the effect we've had on the number of people addicted to drugs, it's still 1.3%, exactly what it was when drugs were completely legal in the United States, 1.3% addiction. After 56 years of them being illegal, when we were getting ready to start a war on drugs, it was still 1.3% addicted. And today, after 40 years of this bloody war, it's 1.3% addicted. So we haven't changed that stat at all, but here's stats that have changed dramatically, and this is because of the war on drugs. No other reason. This is the clearance rate for our police for arresting people for major crimes. And if this is the clearance rate, then this is the unsolved cases. 40% of all the murders in the United States are unsolved. 60% of all rapes and arsons are unsolved. 75% of robberies in my country go unsolved. And if you want to commit a property crime, you're almost guaranteed to walk 83% of the property crimes are unsolved. Now let me point out to you that before we had a war on drugs, in 1963, our police were correctly credited with solving 91% of the murders in our country. Today, we solve 61%. What could make this tremendous drop in our productivity? 30,000 cops, judges, prosecutors, and others at least believe it's because our police are charged with spending so much of their time and energy chasing around a bunch of non-violent drug offenders that we no longer have time to protect our citizens from violent predators, child molesters. And we say, let us get back to doing the things that really matter in our country. I spoke yesterday about how Prohibition has changed drug use in schools, and the fact that our children in high school and junior high have reported for the last 10 years on every government survey that it's easier to buy illegal drugs than it is to buy beer and cigarettes. And of course, as the people I was speaking to yesterday pointed out, the only reason for that is beer and cigarettes are legal commodities, so they're regulated. So if some young person goes into a place where we regulate the sale of those things, somebody says to them, hey, are you old enough to buy this dope? Let me see an ID. And you know that doesn't happen on the street corner. They don't want to see an ID. They want to see one thing. They want to see, show me the money. As soon as they've seen that money, doesn't matter if that child is 4 years old, they're going to get the dope. And then I brought up how much money is involved in this. And it's far more than is needed to buy a cop or a judge or a prosecutor or a politician. It's literally enough money to buy whole nations. $500 billion every year spent on illegal drugs. And not a penny of tax comes out of it to make sure they get all the profits. Well, that's a lot of money, and for those of you that weren't there yesterday, I can't quite figure out how much $500 billion is, so I brought a little visual along to give you an idea how much money this might be. And this next picture is a picture of a mere $255 million that we seized from one Mexican drug dealer, and it's in $100 bills. And I would suggest to you to have a room of $100 bills that would hold $500 billion. You'd need a room 2,000 times that size. So you're talking a lot of money here. And we talked about the fact that drug lords don't even count their money anymore. It's coming in so fast they just weigh it. $1 million in $100 bills weighs 37.1 pounds. And they just weigh it and they put it on a pad and pick it up with forklifts and say, here's 200 million, here's another 200 million. As a matter of fact, the biggest chore that the drug lords have today is what they're going to do with all this money. It's coming in so fast. And of course, what they do is it has to be washed. It has to be laundered. How do they launder it? They buy construction companies or restaurants or hotels. And none of these businesses have to make a profit. As a matter of fact, they're not supposed to make a profit, because this is just a place to launder this money. So if you're a legitimate business person and you're working in a city that has a construction company run by the drug lords to launder the money, how can you possibly compete with a company that doesn't have to make a profit? So they start winning all the bids. And then, of course, they don't care what kind of job they do, so they do this shoddy work product, and after a while it starts falling down. So this affects everything.